My sisters and brothers, first two things that have nothing to do with the gospel. Well, not directly. Number one, myrrh and frankincense are actually the same thing. They're just two different words for the same thing. Both in ancient times would have come from a tree sap that it grows in what is now modern-day Arabia and the east horn of Africa. And so what they're talking about, similar to what we would do with maple syrup, you score the tree, you collect the syrup, same thing, but it's a different tree. It's literally called a frankincense tree. And that's what they're talking about. Now, unless you think they weren't packing through the incense, they didn't measure it by the gram or by the ounce. They used pounds at a time. And in fact, there are records of royal burials where more than a ton of incense was used. It's a lot of tree sap. If you ever go to Germany and you go to Cologne, you will find there what is traditionally the tomb of the three kings. Their bones are one of the things that the Crusaders brought back with them from the Holy Land. Now, how they knew those were the tombs of the kings, I don't know. I wasn't there. I was not in charge of burial records. But that is traditionally the people who we revere as being the three kings who came to visit the Christ child. So if you're ever in Cologne, you'll see in the cathedral a roped-off area with a special tomb, a special shrine dedicated to the three kings. Now, in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2, you're going to be asked to make a choice. You're going to see the consequence at the end of the Gospel, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But we have a problem in the Gospel. Did you hear it? It's very subtle. But Matthew is making you make a choice today. You must make a choice. Who is the King of the Jews? That's not what the Gospel said. What was Herod called? So is Herod the king or is Jesus the king? Next time someone tells you the gospel isn't political, I don't know how you get more political than saying the guy in charge isn't the guy in charge. I fail to see how you get more political than that. So who is the king? Is it Jesus or is it Herod? You can only have one. What's the and for us, it's very easy to say Jesus because there's no consequence to that. Is there? Most of us, unlike the time Matthew's writing this gospel, will probably not be martyrs in that way. We are not confronting the power of the Roman Empire, who, by the way, was supporting King Herod. And that's why Herod was king, was because the Roman government was supporting him. But if we say Jesus is the king, what is the consequence to us? That's what Matthew is asking us to decide today. What is the consequence? What will you give up to be Christian? What are you willing to do or not do, as the case could be, to follow Christ? Do you give up a job? Social standing? Popularity? Would you defy the government? Jesus is. We know the next scene. Would you follow Joseph and Mary to Egypt and flee the country? Or would you stay in place and wait in Bethlehem? And what would you tell another to do? It's not so easy now, is it? My sisters and brothers, we have to make a choice. Is Herod the king and his values? Or Christ and his values? You can't have both. You must make a choice. Who will you follow? And there's a consequence to both. You can follow Herod. He's supported by the imperial army. He's backed by the Roman authorities. And aren't they the true rulers? Or will you follow Jesus of Nazareth, who's homeless? Keep in mind he's living in a cave. When we start to have to take up those values, it's not quite so easy anymore, is it? Because the gospel forces us to make a choice. We either accept the rulership and the values of Herod, or of Christ. And if we choose Christ, we're putting ourselves in opposition to the King of Israel. That's not so easy, is it? What are you willing to give up? be Christian? That's the question Matthew puts in front of you. Who will you follow? If you go to the end of Matthew's gospel, and you go and you read what will happen at the end of time when the goats and the sheep are separated, you'll see the consequence for the choice. But that's in the future. What will you do here and now? This is the feast that closes the feasts of the Incarnation. The feasts of the Incarnation close with the question of who will you follow? Herod or Jesus? Beginning next week with the feast of the baptism of the Lord, when we re-enter ordinary time, we return to the question of what does Jesus teach, how does he live, and we meditate on the teachings and the life of Jesus through the duration of ordinary time until we come, obviously, to the feast of Christ the King at the end of ordinary time. But the choice is to be made today. Where is the King of the Jews? Who will you follow? What will it cost? What are you willing to give up? When we start to realize that our Christianity demands something of us, it's a lot harder, isn't it? It's very easy for us to say, I would give up my life, when there's no pit of lions waiting for us. It's very easy to say, I would feed the hungry, if you know you're not going to go to prison for it. Our prisoners have in Texas. You know it's a violation of federal law to feed people if you know that they're illegally in the country. Are you willing to go to prison for your Christianity? Are you willing to lose a job? Family members? It's a brutal choice, isn't it? We know, of course, from history that does happen, and we have to make that choice. Will we follow and accept the teaching of Christ when it's painful, when it's difficult, when it costs us something? Perhaps friends, family, social prestige. As we know from Christian history, and as we know, in fact, for the first feast, immediately after Christmas, St. Stephen and St. John the Evangelist, one is executed, one is exiled for their belief in Christ. My sisters and brothers, choose wisely, because if we follow the gospel of Christ, it will not be easy. It will put us into conflict, as Matthew tells you this morning. It will also be the way that leads to everlasting life.